Okay, welcome everybody. We're gathered together here today at our Christmas meeting, and we're going to share stories what we did or didn't do, what we had great memories about Christmas, and sometimes Christmas memories are not the best. I've heard stories that are kind of sad, and you kind of feel sorry for the people, and we try to cheer everybody up and try to make sure they've had a really great Christmas. So what I'm going to tell you, I'm going to try to create a picture for you. This is what I try to do at all times. What was it like for you at Christmas? Did you get a Christmas stocking is usually one of the questions I've asked. And some people said, no, I never had a Christmas stocking. Well, I said, let's imagine that you have 6 kids in your family, which we did. We lived at a business in the back, and we would use our grandmother's stockings because she lived with us. We lived with her. Now, these were long stockings. I mean, they were great for kids because we'd always get a lump of coal at the bottom, a bottle of Coca-Cola, and then nuts, and then more Coke, and then a couple of Japanese oranges after 1945. That would take that place. So that is what we would do. And of course, who turns the lights on when you get up Christmas morning? Are you allowed to go roaring into the Christmas tree area, or do you have to wait for Mom and Dad to come out? And who turns the lights on? Well, in our case, we always waited for my father to do that. But we could get our stockings. We could roar in and grab the stockings, but not the presents. And that was kind of how we did it. But of course, prior to Christmas, you had to decorate the house. So being kind of inventive, what we would do is get crepe paper. You remember buying crepe paper about 3 inches wide? Well, we'd string it across the living room and thumbtack it into the ceiling, and we'd crisscross it, and then we'd hang tinsel from it. And now that was the fun game. And then you'd always get criticized because the tinsel wasn't correct. It was not straight. Now, we would never straighten it all out. The women most women here straighten it, that I know, straighten the tinsel so it's perfect. But we didn't do that. We just flung it on, and that was the best. But, of course, there isn't a Christmas without a tree. And I don't know, I guess we were crazy about Christmas trees. We'd go out in gangs, and, of course, we'd start off by, Colin Campbell lived across from the old store, and Colin family lived on the corner of Alderley Road, Brookley Road and the East Saanich Road. And we'd go talk to him, and he'd say, well, there's lots of trees up the back, especially in the old quarry. Now, Jack Mather's not here today, but his grandparents had property on Brookley Road that ended up in a quarry and behind the old fire hall. I hope you remember what number 2 fire hall was. Well, we'd head up there and look for Christmas trees. And we were smart. We'd always take my dad's saw or something. And there'd be 10 of us at least. There'd be Ken Polson and Rick Chaffee and whoever was on patrol. And we'd head out, and people in the houses would be going, uh-oh, must be Christmas. Here they come. And off we'd go. And we would come back with 8 to 10 Christmas trees amongst the group. We make sure everybody got one. So as I got older and seeing that I found girls were important, and I met up with Joan, and I thought, well, I'm going to be a hero here. I'm going to get a Christmas tree for her mother. So we go up to Colin Campbell's when he lived on the highway. Now, it's about a mile past my dad's old service station. It's owned by the CRD now, and big fields, 25 acres or so, or maybe more. And so the little trees were gone. We'd kind of weeded them out. So we just started to climb. And who climbed the trees? Me. I climbed 75, 80 feet. And then I pull the saw up with a rope. I top the tree. And of course, at this time of year, it gets dark early. So when we're getting the tree for Joan, we had about 5 or 6. We're dragging the trees back down through Collins Field. We get them in. I deliver it to Joan's mom's house. And her dad phones me later on. He said, that tree you bought in, we've got a bit of a problem with it. And I said, well, what's wrong? He said, it doesn't smell right. What does it smell like? It smells like cow manure. And I said, you got to be kidding. So, of course, I go in. You couldn't get in the house. It smelled like a cow was in the house. And we dragged it down in the dark through a bunch of cow. Oh, that was the only tree. Our trees were fine. So that's what we did. And, of course, when you go out today, you just look at Christmas tree stands. Well, my dad and most people didn't have a Christmas stand. If you're a carpenter, you probably made a wooden one. But my dad would do, he took a base out of an old chair. It was kind of looked like a Christmas, and we'd pound little pieces of wood into it and then tie it up to the house to make sure it wouldn't fall over on all the kids. So that's what we would do with Christmas trees. They were a big thing. I mean, it was the most important thing of our trip was to go out and get the best Christmas tree we could. When I talked to Nori about bubble lights, I said to Nori, you got bubble lights? He goes, well, yeah, I had them on my window. I'll bring them. They're fabulous. George Robinson, Shirley Robinson's dad. No, everybody here I think remembers Shirley Robinson. She was our neighbor. George Sr. would say, look, don't cut the balsams down, you guys. They're my trees. Because balsams, the branches are flat. So if you put bubble lights on a balsam tree, they work perfectly. You can see how Nori's got them set up there. That's the best. You can't put them on a fir tree, not successfully. So we would go out and we'd come back the following year and say, Mr. Marlson, we found a couple of balsams in Ken Polson's place. So we actually romped the whole area around Elk Lake. There was not much we missed. We pretty well cleaned it out of Christmas trees. And then, as I say, we topped them. That was exciting. Go climb up this tree. Well, it was dark. You couldn't see much, so you weren't worried about falling. And you just, as long as you hang on, down it would come. And because that was our big thing, was Christmas trees. Let's see what else we can tell you about that. Okay. Because I told you about that. What else? Remember getting my first bike. I'm sure all of you remember getting your first two-wheel bike, what it was like. I had a Raleigh. That was a big thing. I thought, wow, I've made it. My dad bought it at Robinson Sporting Goods on Broad Street, and that was a big thing. You get the little ticker tapes and the little handlebars and special lights and special little rat traps at the back, and I mean, it was fantastic. If you had a Raleigh, you had somebody little three-speed connector on the right-hand side. You click it down for 3 speeds, and that was great getting a bike. I mean, for the first time, and being kids living at Elk Lake, they would say, "Where do you live?" And so we live. "Oh, I live in the sticks." In the sticks? What are you talking about? Elk Lake is not that far away. Oh God, nobody'd ever live out there. And I'm sure you've all received that. The story with happened with Joan when she was going to business school. She was having lunch with the gals in the school, and somebody said, they were talking about boys. That's kind of what happens. And they said, she said, "Oh, I'm dating this guy from Elk Lake." And the girl said, "Where?" "Well, Elk Lake." "Who?" Her name was Marion Lydiard. Does anybody remember her? Joan said, "Oh, it's Gary Cunningham." She flipped out. "Not him. Oh my God, he's horrible. He drives me crazy. He go to Sunday school things and he just picks on me all the time." And I came in today and a gal said to me, "I talked to her all the time, got her into trouble." Right? She goes, I said, "Well, I didn't know I did that." But then I said, "Well, Mr. Sturgeon was in the principal at Cutover Bay." So anytime there was something went sideways, he wouldn't look for anybody else. He'd come right to my desk. He knew it was me. We'd played basketball in Nanaimo one time, and we went to a trick and joke shop, and I bought an inkwell. If you tipped it over and had a metal bracket inside, it looked like the ink had spilled. And his desk was perfect. So I snuck into the class before he got there, put this down, tipped it over. He came in, he flipped out, he runs back, runs to the janitor's room, grabs rags, comes back, and he touched it, and it just moved. And he turned around in the class, and he went, "You're the one. Out." I couldn't even get it. I couldn't lie. I tried everything. Oh, I got to tell you one of these things. I think this is kind of cool. It's actually around Christmas time. When I had a body shop, a guy got his car got rear-ended. And the insurance adjuster came out to look at the car, and the owner of the car lived in the Yarrows Estates. Now, does everybody know where Yarrows live up the highway? The gates are just sitting there. You can't get through there anymore. You got to go down Brookley Road and up. And the adjuster was looking at the car, and the owner was there, and the owner said to the adjuster, "He'd like to come out for coffee." And he said, "Yeah, sure." So he looked at me, "Do you want to come too?" I go, "Yeah, I'll come." So we all rode up together. We go in the house. We didn't pay attention to the kitchen, but there's a guy in the kitchen working. And this guy comes out with a tray with coffee. Guess who the guy was? Burl Ives. Is this not Christmas? Burl Ives was his best friend. He came here all the time, and he was up the street. No idea it was him. So do you remember that? You remember Gene Autry, of course? There's another Christmas story. But I never met him. But I did meet Burl Ives, and he was serving us coffee. So you just never know. Yeah, well, Dave McDonald, we know where the observatory is. Dave McDonald lived in the valley on the east side of the mountain. You know, where you go on Old West. And he phoned me and he said, "I need a Christmas tree. Come over and give me a hand." You know that it freezes on the bottom in that little valley. So I said, "Okay, Dave." So we take off, and I didn't like the look of the ice, and he didn't seem to care. So I went around the pond. He's going across the pond, hanging onto the fence. Splash, up to his waist. He gets out, and I said, "Dave, we better get you back to the house." And he goes, "Oh, I'm fine." "Oh, you're not fine. You can't possibly. You're frozen from the waist to the ground." So he said, "No, let's go." So we carried on. He went about another 30 feet, and he almost froze to death. It took him the next day before he could get warm. He sat in a hot bath. That's the only way he could get warm. He said, "I couldn't believe how cold you can get." I said, "Well, I can relate to being cold. I went to this island with Don Spencer and froze to death." Yeah, if anybody falls in cold, freezing water, don't stay there if you can get out. Get the hell out because you're not going to make it. Okay. Oh, the other thing, not many guys remember this, but this was a great story for families that are into sports. My parents, obviously, they were into basketball, and the Saanich Agricultural Hall would host a basketball game every Christmas Day. It would be in the evening, and it was the Harlem Clowns. They came there 5 years in a row, and they were fed a Christmas dinner by Mrs. Hemstreet. She had the corner store. When you leave Saanich, it's on the wide, it was on the left. And I couldn't find, I've looked everywhere the last couple of days for these pictures. We got pictures of us kids hanging on to them after the game. And they said they would never, ever miss coming to Victoria once they found out the hospitality that was given to them, and especially the food. And that was a great story.
This is a Santa that my dad had in the bakery at Vic West when we did the Vic West Bakery in about 1958. I was 11 and was working for my dad then. And then he took a couple of years off, and he was a manager of the Town and Country bowling lanes. And I was about 13 then, and so all my boyfriends went bowling with me. And I'm still doing it. So this guy hung in the bakery at Royal Oak as well. It's very old. And I've got some others at home, but there's only so much I could drag around with me. And the houses were a part of my mom's decorations on the mantle every year, ever since I was a child. I can't remember, very far back, but she put tin foil down and snow and lights, and then just put these little houses up. So now I've kept them, and I put them on the tree every year. And these are from an elderly lady I used to look after, and they're all 100-year-old ornaments that she hung on her little tree. And I met her when I was 36. She grew up on Texada Island, was born and raised on Texada Island, and never married, but it really inspired me. She said when she was 36, she started to tap dance. So and I was looking after her when I was 36, so I started tap dance at Royal Oak Women's Institute Hall. But these are all her little decorations. You'd probably never see anything like this anymore. So I just thought I'd bring them along to share. They're so cute.
Okay, what I brought today is a hand-knit sweater. So what does that have to do with Christmas? I'm a member of the graduating class from Claremont 1963. So we were the first group to actually attend the school after it was built brand new. So in the fall of 1962, there we were up there in a brand new school, but there were no facilities, the grounds hadn't been built. There was nothing to do up there on the hill. Well, Bonnie McMurchie got us started on knitting. She brought books, needles, yarn, and she started knitting up a storm, and so did the rest of us. We would be sitting there at lunchtime knitting away. And so this sweater was knit in the fall of 1962 up at Claremont. And it was a present to Mike Lawrence, who became my husband a couple of years later. But this sweater now is, it's at 60 years old. And it was a Christmas present back in 1962. There you go.
This is going to be short and sweet. Just a little nostalgia. My wife gave me this before we were married when she was 16 years old, and she just turned 80. So many of you will probably remember Ricky Nelson.
Did you ever go for Christmas trees down?
Oh, you want me to tell the story about that? Well, a fella called me up one day and he said he needed a Christmas tree. And so I said, well, I know a good place to get it, because I had a little 14.5-foot runabout boat. So I thought, we'll go over to Portland Island, which is now called Princess Margaret or whichever, and we thought we would thin the trees over there for them. And this fella that was riding with me in the boat, I told him, make sure you dress nice and warm. And here he is sitting right here, and he could probably tell you how cold he got.
How cold was I, Don?
You were freezing cold.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't believe how cold it got on the water. I had no idea it got that cold. I was thinking maybe the lake. I think I had a light jacket on and that was it.
In 1946, our uncle from Memphis, Tennessee, sent up a train for us. And I, of course, was about 6 then. And ever since that, I've had trains. And over the last 20 years, I've repaired them for people. And hopefully the smoke will work on that one. And that's one of the toughest jobs to do, is make the smoke units work on those old trains. And the train that he sent up was an American Flyer S gauge, which is a fairly rare gauge up in this part of Canada. East Coast, there were lots of American Flyer trains. If you go back into the 50s, the train business was a multi-million-dollar business in those days, and today's values, it would be billions. But Lionel and American Flyer were in competition, and a few other people from England and Europe, and it was a big thing. Every department store, pretty well in North America, had a train thing in their Christmas displays. And I brought the bubble lights in for Gary. He conned me into bringing the train in too. But a little later on, we're on the train, and there's a little hand car there too. That maybe we'll get that on the tracks too.
Is that the original one that was in?
That's not originals, my uncle. I had it here when we did the talk with Don and I, and Gary. I had the original one. This is a little later one, but I got a few to choose from. There's probably 30 or 40 of them in the barn. Some of the big collectors in town here have passed away. There was a train set out in Souk, Bill Stevenson. He's passed away, but he had hundreds of dollars worth of trains out there. And his daughter's husband is one of the big lights of trains, and they take groups from the mainland every year to the York Train Show, which is a swap meet for trains. And George Hammond, a friend I was quite involved with trains, he is now in the Broadmead home out here, and so he can't get to his trains either, but he has Lionel and American Flyer and HO, and that's over in the Esquimalt. But there's several other people. Dave Sutherland used to referee basketball when I had my girls' basketball teams, and now he has the something pad printing shop out there by Lee Valley, and he's the one that does all the plastic coating of car signs. You get a car that's got names all over it. They coat the cars with a plastic film, and so but he's got trains but there's other people too.
The things I have brought on the table are not personal to me, but I do volunteer at the Broadview Thrift Store. And as we unpacked 150 totes of Christmas donations, we all had fun looking at the Christmas older vintage things. So what you see on the table have price tags actually still on them, but they gave us a lot of fun. But I do have a quick story. I grew up on Viewmont, which was East Saanich Road, about 5 houses up from the Fireside Inn. And there was no Broadmead, obviously. There was no highway. And behind us, Jack Burgess ran his cattle. So he put a barbed wire fence up. Well, the cattle got out every day and came into our yard. And Jack would come on his horse, and Bonnie and I thought he was just the most handsome person that ever was, this cowboy riding across the prairie. So my dad would go and help him get the cow back in. So for that, Jack said, come on my property, which I think it actually wasn't his property, was it? It was Broadmead Estates, I think. He said, come on my property and cut yourself a Christmas tree whenever you feel like it. So it snowed, and my uncle was there, and my dad and all of the little kids, and off we went. And I'm sure we walked, well, it felt like we walked to Cadova Bay, which you could do. And we walked and we walked and we walked. We finally found the perfect tree, cut it down, dragged it. And as we were dragging it, way off in the distance was the highway, and a police car was sitting there. And we thought, oh, wonder why he's sitting there. So an hour later, we finally get to the police car. Who goes? Didn't say a word, just. And we looked and he said, put the tree down, leave it there. You have trespassed on private property. And my dad, said, well, we were told we could do this, put the tree down. End of story. We trudged home, cold and very sad about our tree. Well, 2 hours later, Jack pulled in the driveway with the tree, as the policeman had told him who we were, and he brought us the tree and apologized. So it had a happy ending.
I got sandbagged here by Susan, but when I lived around Royal Oak, we lived down into Urban Road at Wood Viaduct, and I went by the name of Mike Brown then. And now I'm Mike Lawrence. But this story is not quite Christmas, but it's close. I had a paper route that went from Royal Oak down to Cary Road and all the side roads and back up to Scarborough Road here. On, I think it was November the 11th, 1957, we had a real snowstorm. And my dad built me a sleigh to pack the papers around. Well, I started out at 3:30 in the afternoon, and I didn't get home till about 7 each night. And I had a customer down at the bottom of this hill in that big stone house. And she was, how shall I put it?
Annoyed. She was annoyed.
She was kind of, she's quite an old lady. And every day she went down at 4:30 to get her paper. So on the Saturday, I probably got it to her about 7 o'clock at night. And on Monday, I got a complaint notice in my bundle. She didn't get her paper on Saturday. We didn't deliver on Sunday. That was times back then. So I sort of ignored it and delivered her paper on Monday, as usual. On Tuesday, I get another complaint notice. She's getting her paper a day late. And it took 2 or 3 days to actually figure out she was going down there at 4:30 every day to get her paper. And of course, she got a sink because she never went back. She only checked once. So, and back then, the distribution managers were tyrants. They were really hard to work for. But anyway, it figured it out after a while, and that was what happened November 11th, 1957. And I think we got 30 inches of snow over that weekend. Anyway, that's my story.
Okay, it's a story about Christmas Eves on the Ridge. And we were a fairly musical family with my dad and my mom and my brother, John, and my sister Helen, and myself. And our tradition every New Year's Eve was to go around the whole neighborhood, Santa Clara, Del Monte, and sing Christmas carols to all the neighbors in harmony. And we would always end up at the Tuckies for coffee and hot chocolate. And it was a tradition that we carried on for probably 5 or 6 years. And I can remember how surprised people would be when they'd see this group of people outside their front door singing them Christmas carols. So that's my story for Christmas Eve. Yeah.
Okay, so Gary brought up a lot of memories. And when we were very young, my family moved us from Ontario out to BC. And I was used to having a lot of family around me, and I was the first girl and spoiled rotten, and we came out to BC, and there's like nobody, right? No family, no aunts and uncles, nobody to spoil me like I was used to being spoiled. So the first few Christmases here were a little bit sad for us kids. So then my mom, who was a war bride, her sister was coming from Australia to live in Victoria for a while. And she arrived, I think, late summertime. And so when Christmas came, she said to her sister, all the kids want you to come and spend Christmas with us because, you know, they've never had an aunt or an uncle from Australia come, so would you please come and stay? And she said, sure. And then she said, you have to share a bed with Barbara. She said, okay, I'll still come. So she came, so we were all very excited about having this lovely aunt, and she talked funny as far as we were concerned because her voice was quite different from ours. And then the other thing was about Christmas. We didn't get a lot of stuff all year round, but at Christmas you were just about guaranteed to get at least one thing that you asked for. And you were allowed to ask for two, but you might only get one. So I was about 11 or 12, and I'd never had a new bike. I'd always had somebody's throwaway, or somebody found it in the ditch, or my dad picked it up and fixed it, or never had a new one. So I really wanted a new bike. And the other thing I wanted was one of those record players that looks like a suitcase, which I have again. I finally got another one. So, and all of us, I had two brothers and a sister. Well, I didn't have a sister then. She wasn't born till later. So each of us was allowed to ask for two things, and then you just prayed that you got at least one of them. So our house was built so that when you walked in the front door, there was a hallway that went like this. And if you went to the right, you went through the living room. If you kept going, you turned left and went through the dining room. And if you turned left again, you went down a hallway, and then you were back at the front door. So a very nice, big circle. So all night long, I get very excited about Christmas and birthdays and stuff like that. And I was really bad when I was a kid. And my aunt, I bugged her all night long saying, I wonder if I got my bike. I wonder if I'll get my record player. And at 3 o'clock in the morning, she finally said to me, for God's sakes, get up, go and look, and get right back into bed. So I got up, and guess what? There was a brand new bike under the tree. So I got on the bike and rode it around the house 2 or 3 times, and then I parked it, and then I thought, oh, I'll just look to see if there's anything else there, and sure enough, there was a record player there too. So I got back into bed with my aunt and said to her, oh my God, I got a bike, and I got she said, I heard you riding around the house, and so did everybody else. You're gonna be in big trouble tomorrow. So that's my Christmas story, but it was always a lot of fun. Thank you.
Almost forgot this guy. The Santa Claus, I keep calling it a bear. And it's not a bear, it's the Santa Claus. To get back to a bear, I couldn't find my teddy bear, which sounds kind of silly, but when my parents had the general store, a bus would come around. I was just probably 15 or 16, and a bus would come around with all kinds of novelties in it. And this particular time, it came in with a bear attached to the ceiling, not this one, another one, by itself. And I said to him, what's the bear? He said, it's one I got left. I said, well, yeah, if you want it, you can. He said, you can have it, because it's the last one. So I kept that bear. I give it to every kid that needed a bear. And you know, everybody says if kids aren't doing well or something, you just get a teddy bear. So it's come back to me with, you know, those little circles that you put on loose leaf paper and eyes and buttons, and we've sewed it up some, but it's in a box on our move, and I don't know where it is. This one here came from Hickman Tie Hardware. Do you remember that? My brother Jim worked at Hickman Tie when he first got out of school, and he came home one night with this bear. And this is sat in my parents' fireplace for over 60 years. And it's in really good shape. So my brother Neil saved it from the crash. And I asked him, have you got something from the fire? I didn't realize, I couldn't remember it, to be quite honest. So he gave this Santa Claus. So this has been in the Cunningham family for 63 years from Hickman Tie Hardware. I hope everybody has been not naughty or nice, or I hope you've been one or the other. I hope you've been to see Santa Claus. I hope you still believe in Santa Claus. I know a lot of you kind of have doubts of that. A lady told me a couple of weeks ago, she said, if you don't believe in Santa Claus, you shouldn't even be near Christmas. It's a great time of year. And again, the club would like to remind everybody to have a very safe and happy holiday. Go see all the people that you haven't seen in a long time. And if not, do what we did, like Barb and I suggested. Let's phone the members. Phone somebody you haven't talked to in a long time. Maybe you won't be able to talk to them next year or year after, but just give them a call. It takes 5 seconds, and they'd be so happy to hear from you. And they want to know, why did you call me? Well, I just thought I'd give you a call. Thank you. Thank you very much.